New York City has long been known for its welcoming arms to immigrants, offering a place where dreams can come true. However, as the number of migrants entering the city skyrockets, that tradition is being tested like never before. Here's a closer look at the unfolding migrant crisis in the Big Apple, and the challenges it's creating for the city. Now let's dive in. But wait, before we dive fully into this, take 2 seconds, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on our future amazing content. And hit the like button. It begins. New York has started kicking migrants out. 1. Unprecedented surge in migrants. Since 2022, New York City has witnessed a historic influx of over 200,000 migrants, an overwhelming flood of humanity that now pours into the streets every single day. Up to 600 new faces arrive daily, each with a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. The promise of a better life in the city that never sleeps has always drawn people from all corners of the globe, but now, the very thing that made New York great is being stretched to its breaking point. Picture this: you walk through the bustling streets of Manhattan, the sights and sounds of the city in full swing. But something's different now. Everywhere you look, there are shelters, once empty spaces now brimming with people. Makeshift housing has popped up where luxury condos used to be, and city workers are rushing from one urgent task to another, their faces tired and worn. In the shadow of skyscrapers that were once symbols of ambition and success, this flood of humanity feels like a stark reminder of the struggle for survival. The city, once an embodiment of the American dream, now grapples with a harsh reality. Its resources are being stretched beyond their limits. The surge has transformed the fabric of the city itself. The iconic skyline, filled with promise, seems overshadowed by the rising numbers of individuals seeking refuge. These are not just statistics, they are people, each with a deep, personal story. For every person who crosses the border, there is a hope for a new beginning. But for many, that hope is met with barriers, overcrowded shelters, and a city struggling to keep pace. New York's welcoming arms are now burdened with the weight of providing shelter, safety, and a future for so many. 2. The right to shelter law. New York City's right to shelter law is a beacon of hope in a world that often turns its back on the most vulnerable. This law guarantees that anyone, regardless of their immigration status, has the right to a bed, a roof, and a place to rest. It's a reflection of the city's core values of compassion and inclusion. But, as the numbers of migrants seeking refuge grow, so does the strain on a system that was never designed for such a large-scale crisis. On one hand, this law has been a lifeline, offering safety to those who would otherwise face the harsh reality of homelessness. The image of a migrant family huddled together, knowing they have a place to sleep at night, is a powerful one. Yet, this very law is now becoming a double-edged sword, creating a delicate balancing act for the city. The generous provision of shelter is putting enormous pressure on the already overburdened resources of New York. Every day, the city faces a struggle to keep up with the demand for basic services, housing, healthcare, food, and education. Shelters are bursting at the seams, and resources are quickly being depleted. Long lines at food banks, packed hospitals, and a lack of available apartments are becoming the new normal. The strain is visible on the faces of city workers, who are tasked with managing this crisis in real time. New York's reputation for being a sanctuary for all is being tested, and the future of the law itself hangs in the balance. The true question now is, can New York continue to offer shelter to everyone who needs it, or will this once powerful law become a source of frustration and division, as resources become scarcer and tensions rise? 3. The growing number of shelter residents. By 2024, approximately 60,000 migrants will be calling New York City's shelters home, creating a stark reality that few could have anticipated. While some are temporarily housed in hotels and other temporary facilities, these accommodations are just short-term solutions to a long-term crisis. For many families, these shelters are not just a place to stay, they have become a symbol of their uncertain future, where hope and frustration collide. Imagine the scene: a family of 4 arrives after months of traveling, exhausted and fearful of what the future holds. They are offered a bed in a shelter, but it's not a home. The walls are thin, the space is cramped, and the sense of privacy is non-existent. Yet, in a world where they've crossed dangerous borders, this is a temporary relief. The promise of safety and a chance to rebuild their lives feels real in this moment, but the weight of the unknown is heavy on their shoulders. For families, the wait for stability can feel endless. Every day spent in a shelter is another day lost in limbo, unsure of when or if they will ever have a permanent place to call home. Behind every statistic, the 60,000 residents are the faces of people who once had dreams of a new beginning in a place they thought would offer security. Yet, as time passes, they find themselves trapped in a cycle of temporary solutions, waiting for a future that seems increasingly uncertain. What makes this situation even more heart-wrenching is the emotional toll. For these families, New York was supposed to be a place where they could escape the hardships of their past. Instead, they find themselves struggling with the reality that the city they came to for refuge is now grappling with its own set of insurmountable challenges. The once vibrant promise of a new life is slowly being replaced by the overwhelming uncertainty of what happens next in a city that feels less and less like home. 4. The financial burden, a city on the edge. New York City, a place known for its vibrancy and fast-paced energy, is now fighting an invisible battle, one that threatens its financial backbone. The cost of housing and supporting the surge of migrants has become staggering, with the city spending nearly $10 million a day just to manage the crisis. Think about that, every day, nearly $10 million are being funneled into a system already gasping for air. It's like pouring water into a bucket with holes, trying to keep it from overflowing, but no matter how much you try, the water keeps pouring out faster than it can be filled. In the coming years, projections suggest the city's expenditure could soar to a mind-boggling $12 billion, a financial strain that could cripple the city's economy. Just imagine, over $2 billion was allocated in 2023 for housing, healthcare, food, and basic services for migrants, money that could have gone toward other critical needs, like improving schools, upgrading the city's crumbling infrastructure, or supporting local businesses struggling to stay afloat. These expenses come at a time when the city is still grappling with the aftershocks of the pandemic, an economic hangover that hasn't quite dissipated. With each passing day, the financial pressure intensifies. Essential services are at risk of being stretched to the breaking point, as funds are diverted to meet the immediate demands of housing and caring for newcomers. The city's ability to maintain its world-class reputation as a global hub of culture, finance, and opportunity is slipping into uncertainty. As resources dwindle, it becomes clearer, New York must find a way to stabilize the situation, or risk facing a future where it can no longer be the sanctuary it once promised. 5. Eviction policies, the countdown begins. The clock is ticking. For thousands of migrants who have already faced unimaginable hardships just to get to New York, a new form of pressure is setting in, time itself. In May 2024, the city introduced a set of eviction policies designed to curb the swelling number of shelter residents. The rules are clear. Migrants must secure permanent housing within 30 or 60 days, depending on their circumstances. Young adults face the shorter window of just 30 days, while families with children are given more leeway. But the catch is stark: if they don't meet the criteria, like actively seeking stable housing, they will be asked to leave. For migrants, this ticking clock feels like a countdown to disaster. Many arrived in New York with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of a better life. But as days turn into weeks, the reality sets in. Securing housing in the city is a nearly impossible task, especially for those without the financial resources, connections, or knowledge of the complex housing market. Imagine the desperation, the anxiety of knowing that every day you stay in a shelter is one step closer to the possibility of being homeless. The uncertainty is a constant shadow, and for many, the fear of eviction is becoming a reality. For the city, the policy is a last-ditch effort to prevent an even greater strain on resources. But for migrants, it's a crushing burden that no one should have to bear. The emotional toll of the policy, of families fearing they will be sent back to the streets, is palpable. As the deadline looms, both city officials and migrants are forced into an impossible position, with no easy answers in sight. 6. Controversy and backlash, a divided city. The new eviction policy has ignited a firestorm of controversy that is dividing the city in ways it has not been divided in years. Advocates for migrants are raising their voices in protest, calling the city's actions inhumane and short-sighted. Their argument is clear: evicting migrants who are already vulnerable will only lead to more suffering, more people living on the streets, and more families without hope. These are people who've already risked everything to seek a better life, only to find themselves on the edge of a precipice. New York City's homelessness crisis is already at a breaking point. With over 147,000 people in shelters every night, the city is grappling with its worst homelessness crisis since the Great Depression. The influx of migrants being evicted, many of whom have nowhere else to turn, only threatens to make a bad situation worse. There's a growing fear that this new policy will only add to the already overburdened shelter system, creating a vicious cycle where both migrants and long-time residents are left in a fight for survival, with limited resources and fewer options. But while the advocates' arguments echo through the streets, city officials argue that this policy is necessary to preserve the financial stability of the city. The question, however, remains: can New York continue to be a sanctuary city while also managing the overwhelming demands of both its longtime residents and an influx of newcomers? As the debate rages on, one thing is certain: the city faces an uphill battle, and the cracks in its ability to care for all who call it home are becoming more apparent every day. 7. A bleak future for migrants. Imagine being forced to leave everything you've known behind, your home, your community, and perhaps even your family, because the life you dreamed of was no longer possible. For many migrants, this was the reality. They embarked on a journey that spanned continents, enduring perilous conditions, crossing borders, and braving the unknown, all with one goal in mind: a better life. When they set foot in New York City, the Big Apple, they envisioned a future of hope. This city, after all, has long been a symbol of freedom, opportunity, and a chance to start over. But now, that dream is slipping away. Instead of the fresh start they imagined, they're confronted with a grim possibility: eviction. Imagine waking up each day in a shelter, unsure if you'll still have a place to sleep the next. The fear of being told you have to leave, to face an uncertain future on the streets of a city that was supposed to be your refuge, can be paralyzing. These migrants, who have already lost so much, now face the crushing weight of uncertainty. The dreams that once sparked hope have now become overshadowed by the looming reality of homelessness, desperation, and isolation. For families, it's not just about survival, it's about the emotional toll of seeing their children in limbo, knowing that tomorrow is just as uncertain as today. The emotional impact is deep. The excitement of reaching their promised land fades with every passing day as they are caught in a system that cannot keep up with the surge of people seeking refuge. Their resilience is tested, and the fight to hold on to hope becomes harder and harder. How can they go from envisioning a better life to staring into the abyss of despair? Oh, and by the way, I know you're liking this video already. Go ahead right now and show me some love by hitting the like button. Done. Alright. Let's continue. 8. The financial strain on the city. New York City prides itself on being a sanctuary for those in need. Yet, in the face of an unprecedented influx of migrants, the city is beginning to buckle under the pressure. Mayor Eric Adams and his administration have made it clear: the eviction policies are not just a form of regulation, they are a last-ditch effort to prevent the city from spiraling into financial ruin. At the heart of this decision lies a painful truth: New York simply doesn't have the resources to accommodate everyone who arrives. The financial strain is immense. Billions of dollars are being spent on shelter, food, healthcare, and basic services. The system is on the verge of collapse, with no clear solution in sight. While officials argue that evictions are necessary to preserve the city's long-term survival, the reality is far murkier. For every migrant who is sent away, the city faces the risk of seeing them drift elsewhere, searching for refuge in other communities. Many may find themselves wandering the streets once again, or worse, finding their way into another overcrowded shelter in a neighboring city. In an ideal world, New York's rich resources would offer a cushion for every dreamer who arrives at its doorstep. But the truth is that the city's financial stability is at stake, and that stability is teetering on the edge. The question remains: how long can a city that thrives on the hopes of others continue to carry the weight of so many? The real question lurking in the background is whether the city will face a permanent shift. Will the shining city on the hill remain a beacon for immigrants, or will it become a cautionary tale of overextension and burnout? Without a sustainable plan for affordable housing and resources, the immediate future is clouded with doubt and tension. The situation might seem bleak, but it's also a race against time to find a solution before the city reaches its breaking point. 9. Homelessness crisis worsens. New York City's homeless crisis is already a catastrophe in itself, with more than 147,000 individuals forced to sleep in shelters every night. Now, as the migrant crisis intensifies, there's growing fear that these numbers will surge even higher. Shelters that were already at capacity are facing an influx of new arrivals, many of whom have nowhere else to go. For those who have already been living in shelters for months or years, the fear is tangible. These spaces, meant to be temporary sanctuaries, have become overcrowded and strained. The lack of adequate space, resources, and support services is a daily battle for thousands. These individuals, some of whom have been through unimaginable hardships, are now facing the added pressure of a system buckling under the weight of its own failures. Now, with migrants facing eviction, the question arises: where will they go? The streets? Other overcrowded shelters in nearby boroughs? Or perhaps they'll be forced to find shelter in places deemed unsafe, like abandoned buildings or even under bridges. The harsh reality is that many of these newcomers will soon be counted among the city's homeless, exacerbating an already fragile system. The social services that these vulnerable groups rely on are already overburdened, making it harder for anyone to get the help they need. As the homeless population continues to rise, the question becomes, who will care for them? For many of these individuals, their greatest hope lies in finding stability. But as resources become more scarce, it's becoming harder to imagine a future where things improve. The risk is that the very system meant to provide shelter and support will become a place of despair. If the migrant crisis isn't addressed with urgency, it could lead to an even deeper homeless crisis, one that swallows the hope of many for years to come. As New York's resources are stretched to their breaking point, the prospect of true change feels like an elusive dream, slipping further away with each passing day. 10. The need for new solutions, breaking the cycle. While evictions may offer temporary relief, they come at a steep price, one that New York City can't afford to keep paying. The truth is, short-term fixes like evictions don't address the root of the problem, they merely shift the burden somewhere else. Instead of perpetuating a cycle of temporary shelter and uncertainty, the city needs to focus on long-term solutions that create stability for both migrants and the homeless population. New York can't keep putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. It needs to build a robust safety net that doesn't just catch people when they fall, but also helps them climb back up. Picture a city where migrants don't just survive in shelters, but thrive in communities. The city needs to invest in creating long-term housing solutions, affordable apartments, transitional housing, and even cooperative housing models where migrants and locals can live side by side, working toward a common goal. This isn't just about sheltering bodies, it's about restoring dignity. Job training programs, which equip people with the skills they need to support themselves, could be game changers. Imagine a migrant who arrived in New York with little more than hope and a suitcase, now learning English and acquiring skills in tech, construction, or hospitality. It's about giving people the tools to thrive, not just survive. Mental health services are another crucial piece of the puzzle. For many, the trauma of fleeing violence, leaving loved ones behind, and enduring harrowing journeys leave scars that can't be healed with just a roof over their heads. Comprehensive mental health support would give individuals the chance to heal, rebuild, and regain their sense of agency. Add in legal help, and suddenly, you have a system that doesn't just offer refuge, it offers a second chance at life. Without these long-term strategies, New York City risks deepening its crisis, making the situation harder to resolve in the future. The challenge is to create a city where people, whether migrants or long-term residents, are not just existing, but truly living. A place where every individual has the support they need to rise, to build a future, not just for themselves, but for the city as a whole. Let us have your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us. If you found this information enlightening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content about cities and cultures from around the world.